Persona 1, or Revelations Persona, or Shin Megami Tensei Persona, or Megami Iban Roku Persona, is the game that started the entire Persona franchise. If you haven't heard of it, well, I fear you may be living under a rock. I mean, the series is so popular that it not only outshines and outperforms its parent series, Shin Megami Tensei, but Sega themselves considers it to be one of their three main pillars, the other two being Like a Dragon and Sonic the Hedgehog. To not know what Persona is, or have at least heard of Persona 5, is strange. I mean, Persona 5 Royal is just one of the best games ever made, just ask Metacritic or any review site. And if you don't trust them, ask the weird kid who was really into anime at your local high school. Okay, before we even continue, I have to address two things. First off, yes, I know Shin Megami Tensei If technically is the first game in the series due to heavily inspiring the gameplay of Persona and being canon to the first two Persona games. But look at this box art. Do you see the word Persona on it? Secondly, yes, I know that the PSP version has drastically different music than the original PS1 release. The original game was composed with the story in mind, leading to a truly atmospheric JRPG experience. PSP version, however, came out shortly after Persona 4. Persona 4 had an incredible soundtrack that matched the feel of that game, and they wanted the Persona 1 PSP port to match that vibe. This leads to the PSP soundtrack feeling thematically jarring at times, but in my opinion, it's not as bad as Mega 10 fans make it out to be. I mean, sure, the game doesn't feel as moody and kind of depressing and doesn't really tie into the vibes of the story. The music itself isn't that bad, and the tracks you're going to be hearing the most, honestly, still fit pretty well, at least in my opinion. Plus, the PSP version is easily the better version to play, as the original release is just so slow. Oh my god! Now, my first experience with the series was Persona 5. I actually forgot what got me to try the game, but I went in pretty much completely blind. This actually worked in my favor, as P5 is not only the most accessible game to newcomers in the series, but it also made an important story beat regarding the Velvet Room hit a lot harder, if you know you know. I later pre-ordered Persona 5 Royal and beat that game as well, and kinda went down like a Mega 10 rabbit hole, absorbing and learning as much information as I could. Seeing how grand and how big this series was, having as little exposure as it does in the West, was kind of crazy, but also just really cool to learn about. There's so many one-off titles here and there that are just fascinating little pieces of Mega 10 history. About a month ago, I got a PSP Go, and remembered after doing research that the first Persona game got a remake on the PSP. So I decided to take a trip to Blockbuster and rent the game for myself, wink wink nudge nudge. I went in blind, full of excitement, determination, and eagerness to experience what would later become one of my favorite games of all time. I got skill checked 3 hours in and had to restart my run while consulting a guide. Yeah, this game is definitely an old school JRPG. While it was very well received for the time and still holds up pretty well, if you don't take the time to learn the systems of the game itself, you're not going to make it very far. It doesn't do a good job of explaining it as you go like Persona 5 does, but there are still explanations you can read. The only issue is I'm not reading all of that. I don't have the time to do that. I just want to play the game. I foolishly tried to play this like Persona 5 and was not really utilizing the Velvet Room or picking specific stats to level up. This was a bad idea. As much as the game is frustrating, around 90% of the deaths and softlocks were purely because of my own negligence. Occasionally you just get your ass whooped by a demon because the turn order isn't what you expected it to be, but otherwise, I consider this game challenging yet fair. This didn't stop me from getting mad at the game and pretty much sticking to a guide to get me through the entirety of it. What also does not help with that issue is the fact that there are several choices to make throughout the game. While the majority of them are obvious, if you make a wrong choice, you can be locked out of the option to create someone's ultimate persona towards the end of the game, which can be pretty bad considering the final dungeon is hard as hell. On top of this, there's even a bad choice you can make that if you accidentally hit it, you can get locked into a bad ending and you have to redo a little bit of a dungeon just to remake that choice. Not that that's a bad thing and it can lead you to a secret couple boss fights, but it's still kind of annoying. But now that I had a guide at the ready, I was ready to start Persona 1. The game swaps between two perspectives, a top-down isometric view for shops, interacting with NPCs, and story beats. The majority of gameplay is first-person dungeon crawling that leads into battles with demons. Battles happen randomly with either the party having the advantage, the demons having the advantage, or neither group having an advantage. One by one, you command your party as they attack using a grid-based system. You can also change the formation of the group to better suit each party member's attacks. For example, an arrow user might be put towards the back so they can cover more ground, while a melee user might be put more towards the front so their attacks can actually hit. In battle, you can use physical attacks, gun attacks, or persona abilities, which do a wide variety of things, including elemental attacks, passive abilities, buffs and debuffs, etc. If your party's health reaches 0, then the pearly gates are going to have some visitors. If the enemy party's health reaches 0, congrats, you've just committed murder and I hope you can live with yourself. Where Persona differs from the usual JRPG is the demon contacting system. Let's say you really aren't feeling like fighting. You can choose to instead pull up a chair, pour some tea, and strike a conversation with the demon. This can have a variety of benefits, such as bonus XP, a rare item, or the spell card of the said demon. These spell cards you obtain can be fused to gain new personas. The higher the level of the demon who gave you the spell card, the higher the level of your persona. On top of all this, the personas you obtain, as well as the demons you fight, are all tied to different arcana. If the arcana of a party member matches the arcana of their persona, they have an advantage in battle overall, as well as with other demons of that same arcana. The issue is that there are 16 total arcanas to keep track of, as well as, like I said before, a complicated and not well explained system to persona fusion. I mean, it may be well explained, but I'm not reading all of that. That is so much text to go through. I just want to play the game. Overall, the combat is still enjoyable, and the battle themes go crazy, making grinding not feel so bad, well, at least until late game, but more on that later. And this is pretty much the gameplay loop for the entirety of the game. Like I stated before, I followed a guide to not only help me along the way, but to also guarantee I got Reiju, a somewhat secret party member who most players consider to be the best. I can agree on the front, as not only was he very effective in battle, but he also added to the story in some minor ways. Speaking of the story, this is the part of the video where I spoil it with a brief synopsis. So skip to this timestamp if you either do not want to be spoiled or are uncomfortable with the following topics. Our protagonist, or as he's so lovingly referred to, Boy with Earring, and his friends are playing a game called the Persona game. It's kind of like Bloody Mary, in which they do a specific series of motions while saying the word Persona. What they end up actually doing is causing a mini earthquake to happen in the classroom, and lightning strikes a bunch of them, and they all pass out. While asleep, they are visited by Philemon, an omnipotent being who resides between realities and worlds. He grants them the power to awaken to their true selves. Upon waking up, they are prompted by the principal to go get themselves checked up at the hospital. While there, they visit their friend Maki, who has been in the hospital for a year now, and she starts to have an episode while they're there. This prompts her to be rushed to the ICU, and the rest of the party goes to follow and make sure she's okay. As they're waiting, another earthquake strikes the entire town, and in an instant, the whole town is taken over by demons. The party then awakens to their personas, and realizes that they can fight back against the demons, and so begins their quest to uncover what is really going on. Our search brings the party to Sebek, a corporation run by a man named Kandori. Kandori made his scientist create a machine that would ultimately let him reshape the world in his own image, or in other words, killing everyone on the planet. A totally rational and awesome plan that definitely isn't weird or anything. Kandori is a safe and well-adjusted individual who can be trusted around government property. When trying to stop the machine, the party gets transported to another world. After a lot of story that I am skipping over to save time, we learn that this world was subconsciously created by Maki due to her depression from being stuck in the hospital. Being trapped in that room for a year caused her to develop clinical depression, and she would visualize an ideal version of not only herself but the entire town. However, the machine Kandori made somehow got twisted with her brain wavelengths or something and created a gateway to her ideal version of reality. The game then becomes a quest to not only save the entire world, but also the very soul of your dearest friend, Maki. You and the party help her realize that it's okay to be depressed about your situation, but if you look around, there are still people who love and care for you, despite what you may think. And no matter how hard life may get, you have the power within yourself to change for the better. Everyone can be their ideal self, so long as they accept the good and the bad. The final boss fight is against the demon known as Pandora, who has taken the form of what I can only describe as Maki's depression realized in a physical form. Pandora is a disgusting, twisted, vulgar mess of a creature who wears Maki's face until shedding its skin halfway through the fight to reveal a beautiful butterfly woman. You are literally fighting Maki's alternate selves in an attempt to bring her back from her deep depression. Once defeated, the world is saved and everyone is transported back to their own reality, leaving the ideal Maki and Pandora to fuse together inside of Maki's subconscious. She is no longer sad about her situation in the real world because she realizes that her friends still care about her. In the end, everyone is seen walking out of St. Hermelin High, laughing and smiling. It's also alluded to that you and Maki started dating, but honestly the end credits stuff is kind of irrelevant unless you're gonna play the sequel. The story is a fantastic metaphor for depression and a very encouraging message to anyone struggling with it. It shows that despite how bleak things may seem, you always have the power to change and get better. Not only that, but it's okay to ask for help from people as long as you don't have to go through whatever you're dealing with on your own. There's also a secondary quest that was missing in the original English release but present in the PSP remake called the Snow Queen quest. This features the party investigating the rumor of a cursed stage mask that possesses Saiko, a teacher at your high school. You then have to fight through some towers to get shards of a mirror or something. I'm not fully sure as I haven't played it nor have I read up on it. It takes place right before the main story of Persona 1 fully kicks off, but it essentially doubles the length of the game. The only problem is it is easily missable as you have to do several specific things to trigger the events. It's recommended on a second playthrough of the game. My playthrough of the game went surprisingly well once I started following a guide. That is until around the 15-hour mark. I was in the final dungeon, about to challenge the last boss, my main character had a broken build, I had a ludicrous amount of healing items, and I was ready to rumble. I then spent 30 minutes on the boss and ended up getting my whole party wiped in one turn. After literally dropping my PSP out of pure shock, I realized something. I'd been playing the game wrong. All this time I was breezing through battles and blasting through the story, but when I stopped and actually looked at my stats, I realized my mistake. Boy with Earring was level 63, Maki was level 60, Reiji was level 50, and Mark and Nanjo had just barely broken level 40. By not using the characters in battle, they, in turn, did not earn nearly as much XP. This led to me having to grind for an extra 20 hours at the literal very end of the game just so everyone else could catch up to me. Yes, I am aware this is a problem that is entirely of my own making. Am I still gonna complain? Yes, because I'm mad. If anything, this should be a reminder to everyone watching that if you choose to play this game for yourself, actually take the time to learn it. Do not try to do what I did and cheese the game. Or at least do a better job of cheesing it than I did. Overall, Persona 1 is just a solid classic JRPG. I emphasize classic as it does not have the benefits of a modern JRPG and can definitely show its age plenty of times. Would I recommend this game to the average person? Probably not. Would I recommend this to a Persona fan? Also no. I know that sounds bad, but hear me out. Persona 3 through 5 are insanely good games with their own shared universe. They are what Persona is currently most known for, and for good reason, as each of these games are a gold standard in terms of JRPGs. The original Persona, even when compared to the Persona 2 duology, feels outdated in way too many aspects to recommend. If you're a fan of the series, you'll enjoy it for that purpose. Or even if you're looking for an old school JRPG, you can't go wrong with this game. But I can't recommend this to the average person like I can Persona 5. In the end, I give this game a 6.5 out of 10. Again, not terrible, but it's just there's so many better Persona games out there to play. Thanks for watching.